Is this on this side? Where are the stage lights? The lights, the controls for. Like here.
Kai ne fushi, kai ne kunci, haushin ka mashaya jini ba ka koshi, kamar kwarciyar rana da doguwar tafiya, ina za ta kai ka? Gama ita haryar ramako cike take da guguwa, kuma kamar ruwar dare babu wanda ya san ƙarshenta.
Don't just watch. Own a piece of the legacy. Invest now.
And I was really getting into it. You know what I mean? Even Shogo, that's how they were peppering me with the thing. I was just relaxing in my chair that hey, evil. Okay, let's give them a round of applause. So it gives me great pleasure to invite first the host, my dear friend and journalist, Mr. Abdulkareem Baba Aminu. I like those whoop whoops. Are you okay? And of course, my dear friend, Mr. Ferdinand Adimefe. I want Kabafest clapping. Oh. And Mr. Isaac Matui Thomas. You're very welcome to the Kabafest stage.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Kabafest 2024. Now, clap. Is it easy? When was the last time you had a Kabafest? Exactly. So, it's good to see everyone. It's an honor for me to talk to these people. I've spoken to them before. I'm very familiar with the project. I've seen what most of you here have not seen yet. Yeah. So it's an adaptation of an incredibly important, very, very beautiful story, which most of us are familiar with, the Passport of Mallam Ilia. And it's written by Cyprian Ikwensi. It's set in the north, so which makes it quite unique. And I think in those days, nobody really cared where you were from. Just do something good and everyone will key into it. Some people probably don't even know Cyprian Ikwensi wrote it, you know. So Ferdy is here, Isaac is here. Isaac is head of story of Magic Carpet Studios, and Ferdy is the producer. He's the money man. And I'm going to ask you a few questions. I'll start with you, Ferdy. Um, I'm sure you threw your money in because you believe in the project and all that, but I'm curious, how did the decision or how did the project to adapt the passport of Mallam Ilia come about?
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here. So I grew up in reading a lot of literature. So I read African Night Entertainment, Jaguar Nana, things from Wale Soyinka all the way to even modern writers like Helen Abila, Measuring Time. So I was very much a literature mind. And we started the animation studio about 5 years ago. And one day we sat in the office and we're thinking, we love to make animation, we love to watch animation, but if we wanted to create something, what could it be? And we thought we could go where we've always known, African literature. And I really think that there is a gold mine there. We've not really tapped into the literature world. And so we were throwing up options, and Passport of Madame Ilia kept coming back. So we thought that, okay, we'll go reread it and get a fresh perspective. And when we did, we settled and know that this was it. Even last year, Netflix ran a poll and they asked again, what novel would you like to see adapted into a film? And Passport of Madame Ilia kept coming up. I can understand why that would be the case. It's a small read, 90 pages, but a very powerful and cinematic way. The writer was a lot simpler, right? And this had the fight scene. So if you watch Prince of Egypt, you would feel that type of energy, right? And that was what we settled for. But 19th century northern Nigeria was set in Kano, a love story. So it's a romantic thriller. And at the time, this was during the colonial invasion when the British conquered the Great Wall of Kano. And there was a lot that we could find in the story. There was sound, there was color, there was music, there was fashion, there was architecture, there was artistry. And if we wanted to export something about Africa, I thought it would be best for us to pick one that can help us to interpret it in a visual way. Again, I think pretty much the last maybe 10 or 20 years, the northern part of Nigeria has been eclipsed with stories of terrorism. And it looks like that is the only thing looming over and the only thing we're talking about. But we think that there is more beauty than the headlines. And this story is one of the things we found that we could share. That was why we settled for it. We thought it would be a compelling and a powerful story. And it's one way we can actually show the beauty of Nigeria. Interestingly, the writer was actually someone from the East. His name is Cipro Quincy. So he grew up in the North. And I thought it was interesting that in the era when people are talking about division, fighting and fighting, this was a writer who, though was from the eastern part of Nigeria, wrote about a love story set in the North. And we in Lagos were producing it. There is just something for everyone in Nigeria and beyond.
Thanks, Ferdy. So before I move on to Isaac, there's a little fun fact about the cast of this movie. The love interest, who's Zarah, is actually voiced by Kaduna State's own Hadiza Blel, popularly known as Dija, the singer. So on that note, I'll move to Isaac, and I would like to know the process which you used to break down the adaptation, what were the choices you had to make? Did you have to amplify something? Did you have to tone something down? What were the cultural nuances you had to play up or down? All these little big things. What did you have to do?
Okay, so it was a very difficult thing to do to begin with, because when you're doing adaptation for animation is a very unique space, right? If we were adapting for live action, we could have taken some things for granted, said, okay, the actors will bring these things to life. But you're doing animation and it's all about voices, and drawings and all of that. So we owe to different people different things. We owe the author the respect of keeping to the soul of the story, what he wanted to do. But when you're adapting something to animation, it has to be visually appealing. And so there was a lot of creative license, I would say, that we took into interpreting some of the elements that were captured in the book, because adaptation is about interpretation. You have the book, but are all those things set in the book visually appealing in the manner that were presented? So we had to do a visual walkthrough of the entire thing. So first thing was, let's go to Kano. That was the first thing. Everyone has read the book, put together a team, took us about a year to do that. And then it's okay, let's go to Kano. Let's go spend a month in Kano. Go around, talk to people, older people, because the story was set in the 1800s. So we were privileged to talk to people that were 80, 90 years old, and, and had deep conversations with them, you know, talk to them, ask them how these things were in play in those days when they were young, because they were the ones closer to the story than we are right now. And so they gave us a lot of direction that improved on what he captured in the book. So we were able to capture some things as authentic, a lot more authentic than it was captured in the book. I'm not saying that the writer didn't do well, but Kano people know Kano very well. And so they gave us a lot of insight. And then we came back, started doing the writing. The entire adaptation process took us about 14 months to just get the book into a proper screenplay format for animation. A lot of back and forth, a lot of it, but at the end of the day, that was the first thing we did.
So one of the things I like about this project is it's basically it's how do I put it? It's easy picking for it to be labeled as cultural appropriation. Oh, why are you going into here? You're not supposed. But they can't. It's a bloody good story. It's written by someone from the East. It's set in the North. I mean, what can you possibly hate about that story? Plus, it's a really good love story. I think everybody likes a really good love story. Just one more question for you before I move to Ferdy. Story related. The fight sequence with the dream spirits. You guys took a few liberties from the story, right?
Not exactly, because there was a lot of fighting in the book. In fact, everything, the soul of the story, or the main theme of the story is vengeance, right? But the vengeance started as a result of a contest, which was a blood sport. So there was a lot of fighting, even in the book, a whole lot of fighting. The book started with fighting, ended with fighting. So, but everyone has a way they see fight written on paper, right? But choreographing the fight, you know, it looks like the Dambe thing and everything. And that was also something we consulted Dambe fighters, some other martial artists, to actually ask them how do we do these things, you know, all of that. And then, yeah, we took some liberties for visual representation. What you read on paper might not necessarily present that way on screen. And then, fun fact, okay, Cyprian is from the east, right? Okay, that's that. But I wrote the adaptation here. So
I
I
know.
think it
Borno
balances
State,
it.
yeah?
No, I was born here in Zaria. Yes.
It's coming together nicely.
So I'm just home here.
You know, your name does suggest like a Kenyan heritage.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay. So back to the movie. I noticed I've seen clips, like I told you guys. It has an old Hollywood vibe. Even in the clips you saw, you can see it. It feels it's very about it. I said something like, I won't be shocked if it wins an Oscar or something like that. And believe me, I believe in this project that much. It's they're very well prepared. Now, you know, something like this requires a lot of money. How did you guys get the money to start this? This is for you now, Ferdy. And how much money do you have to find to finish the project? It's 4 years or 5 years. It's a long time. We can't wait.
All right. So, how much? Where did we get the money? So, yes. Let me backtrack a bit. So, at the time we wanted to do the story, we were looking for a head of story, and I met Isaac, and I was very excited when I realized that he was from here. because we wanted the head writer to be able to stay close to the culture as much as possible. And I think that's one of the best decisions we ever made. But Isaac joined the studio and joined us to build the studio, right? So he became the head of story. 2 years in, we started to work for companies. So even when we tried to raise funds and realized it was expensive and Nigerians didn't really understand animation from an investment point of view, we decided to produce it ourselves by taking on jobs. So we work with companies like Cartoon Network, Sesame, done a bit for Microsoft, and that helped us, right? So we started to fund. But this, yeah, so I would say this to say, if you're a creative in the house, at some point, you have, if you're facing quite challenges in raising capital, author, you have to figure out sort of like a hybrid way of doing it. So while you're looking for money for your book, maybe you could start as a content writer and save up for a book, right? So you just have to figure out how to keep it going, and that's what we did, right? So, but this year we decided we wanted to speed up a bit. So we went on WeFunder, and we thought what was left to complete the movie, because we're like 70% in, we needed about $500,000. Animation is very expensive because you have to do a lot of software licensing, and the softwares are not localized, they're dollar cost. You have to do a lot of post-production sound, and all of those things are dollar cost, right? So even while we have people in the studio, we need more people. Animation is also a function of capacity. So if you have like 10 guys, you might be going like 2 minutes every month. Maybe if you have like 20 guys, you can go 4 minutes. So if you have like 40 guys, you're going to double up that thing. So when we have more funds, you double and have more speed, right? We were really hoping that in 12 months, we should call this a wrap. So we have on WeFunder, and the WeFunder team were very excited about it. They were like, this is not from Nigeria. Like, I can't believe that Nigerians can actually do this, which is one of the things that actually gets us going, because we think excellence is still something that the blacks can actually celebrate. So we are really seeing the reception. Now, we found that in the last 5 weeks, we've raised about $31,000, and it's been organic. So by next week, we're doing our first digital marketing push to drive the campaign. Now, we're realizing that a lot of African immigrants are backing the campaign. But again, I'll say this of the West. 25 years ago, Disney released Mulan. The other year, they released the Lion King. And I think before the end of this year, you're going to be watching Mufasa. Now, what you're going to be finding coming from the West is endless repackaging of already existing stories. But I think they know that they're running out of stories. But Africans, we have these treasure troves of stories that we're sitting on, from our fairy tales, our folk tales, to our literature, to everything, right? So if you're a writer here, it is your time. Because really, they just released Iwaju, one of the comic collection that Disney acquired. HBO is going to drop something called Iyanu. And they're buying these things because they know that they need African stories. But when they buy them, they own them. But when we create them and fund them by ourselves, we own them. So even when we create it, it's not just that we're entertaining the world, we're creating wealth. But in the case when your investors, or when they buy your IP, you're watching it, but Africans are not getting richer for it. And I think it's sort of like neo-colonialism on a level, when you're not able to own that which is yours. But there is also the side of the government not having the right policy to structure how creatives can access capital. For one, I would say if you're creative and you have an idea, that idea should be bankable. Anywhere in the world where they value ideas, you can walk into a bank and you have a good story, and you can find people that can back it. In Nigeria, they'll tell you it's just an idea. But ideas are powerful. The worlds are shaped by ideas. So until we come to a point where we respect that a book can become a collateral, an IP can become a collateral, creators are going to be just having to borrow and beg to keep their dreams alive, right? So for us as a studio, combining service offering and producing ourselves has kept us going. And they're looking for creative ways to bring in additional fund is how we have survived and sustained this project. And because we believe in the potential of it, we're doing this. Yeah.
Thank you, Freddie. I have one that works now. So it's interesting you mentioned Iyanu, Child of Wonder. That's a complete title. It's it was a it's based on a graphic novel by Roye Okupe, who's also an Ake Festival guest. So you can see the relationship with Kabafest. So the graphic novel was so popular that he shopped it around, and Cartoon Network picked it up, and I think they finished the episodes. They're just working on a release schedule right now. Yeah, yeah. And which leads me to my next question. I'm wondering, why haven't you guys like shopped it around to maybe the major companies or networks or even Netflix or have you? We just don't know. What's
we,
up
we,
with
we
that?
did, and we really got the response, right? So, in fact, Netflix reached out to us first. And but the way that the conversation was going, it was sort of like a buy conversation. And we didn't think that it was a project we wanted to sell. One is a licensed IP, and the deal we had with the family was not a sale deal, it was a produce together deal, right? So because we didn't own it 100%, we couldn't have the conversation as to what we. So every time we meet a lot of people who have reached out to us, they want to buy it. But we don't want to sell because we think that there is beauty in what this can be. Now, when you sell the story, you lose the power to tell it the way you want to tell it. But once you retain that ownership, you have the capacity to say, this is how we want to present Africa. For the longest time, the pictures of Africa have always been seen through the lens of poverty and war and starvation. And I think those are not the pictures I know of Africa, right? And I think for us, we want to be able to tell African from a place of power. Now, as a studio, we have two questions whenever we create. The first question is, what if Africa was never colonized? What type of stories do we want to tell? The second thing, what if Africa colonized the world? How can we tell our stories? And you come into a place of power and consciousness when you do, right? It changes your lens of thinking. So, and I think we've always been approaching stories from the place of aid, grants, and that's not the place of power. You cannot really come from a place of strength. So I think for us, we want to be able to retain this, right? Maybe in subsequent IPs we might sell, but for the integrity of what we have, we think our vision as a studio is to grow wealth with Africans, not just to sell the stories, but to create it, own it, and continue to recreate it.
And here I was thinking it was all about the money.
Yeah, can I say something? Let me add
Yes,
to what he
please.
said. I hope I don't get into trouble for saying this, but so here's one thing that was a very harsh reality for us, right? Companies reach out to us, individuals reach out to us. We could have finished this film 2 years ago, 3 years ago actually, if we had agreed to some of those terms. But we're we're very big on preserving the story in its richness the way it is. I'll give you an example of someone we met who wanted to change certain things visually. Now, I can tell you this for a fact that one of the most beautiful cultures in terms of visuals, symbols, architecture is actually northern culture. If if you've seen, I never knew the um the Iowa symbol is that awesome until I saw it in France, and it was just awesome. I saw it, and I went to it. I told someone, I know where this thing is from. This is our thing. It looked great, but some people wanted to change some element to look in a certain way. I mean, journalists here, you know what house style is, right? They wanted to do it according to their house style. They wanted to paint something in a certain way that was going to take away the soul of the story in terms of how it looked. We didn't want that. We could have done it that way, but I don't think any one of you here would have liked it if we had gone that way. So we took the hard way of saying, if you're going to come up and support this project, then you have to do it in such a way that our own people will like it. Because what would it be if they like it out there, but the culture we're representing is grossly misrepresented? It would have been a bad idea.
Okay, sorry. To just remind you guys two things. There is anime, right? And I don't know if you guys are big consumers of anime, but anime is coming all the way from Asia and is now an export. Guys, when I was growing up in secondary school, the guys that defined my secondary school era, because I look young, but I might not be that young. So the guys that defined that era were people like Biggie, Tupac, right? Maze, that was it, right? And interestingly, if you wanted to be a rapper, you had to sound like Tupac, you had to sound like Biggie. So my failed rap career was pretty much sounding like Tupac and Biggie. Now let's fast forward to 2023, 2022, 2021. What are we finding now? That for you to really, really globalize, then if you have to be global, if you want to globalize, you literally have to westernize. You have to sound like the West. Now, guess what? Last year there was Thames and was Thames did something like a collab, right? There was Rema and Selena Gomez. there was Chris Brown, and I think with Kid. Like, so you're finding a lot of collaboration, but when you listen to the songs, you hear more Afrobeat in it than you hear anything else. So what is looking like to a lot of the global, the Western artists, for you to globalize, you literally have to Africanize. You have to be able to sound like you have to find that Afrobeat. So Afrobeat, it was something that in the past it looked like, how was that? Now Afrobeat is like it's in. But a group of people paid the price. They were consistent in pushing creativity, in honoring the authenticity of the sound. And today the world has come to respect them and create a space for them. I think that's what we'll do with animation, right? Push it, believe in it, be proud about it. Because we think that westernization is development, but it's not the same thing. Westernization is not the same thing as civilization, right? There is unique civilization dating all the way back to pre-colonial Africa and to prehistoric Africa that we need to reclaim and redeem and retell, guys.
So we've spoken about some aspects of this. I'm going to be like the average Nigerian and ask you what the government has done, but not in that direct manner. Um, have there been like maybe structures or policies that maybe you've keyed into? I know animation is not something we're too big about, on in Nigeria. Even the examples I gave are totally restricted to the West, America in particular. And we have quite a number of studios that produce really good world-class animation right now in Nigeria. But it seems like it's just an independent thing that people are just like, by sheer will, grit, personal effort, put it together. How it couldn't have been easy to even get to where you are right now.
So governments, we love them because they brought us here. But I would say to this, if you look to Europe, Europe is one of the major producers of animation. But one of the reasons why Europe has succeeded is because among the European countries, they have something called bilateral trade agreements, or they have co-production treaties. So this is what it means in layman terms. Isaac is from Germany. I'm from Italy, and we want to produce a movie that's going to cost say $3 million. Isaac will go to his government. His government has this film fund that will give him 50% of the fund. I, the Italian, I'll go to my government. My government will now give me 50% of the film fund, and then we have 100% of the budget, and we produce. So co-production treaties actually is one of the reasons why places like Canada, UK, Europe, and even America tend to produce very easily and quickly. But there is none for Africa. So because you don't have co-production treaties, even if I sign a deal with a French producer, his government will give him 50% of the fund, but my government will give me a thank you letter. And thank you letter does not translate to film fund. Now, we have one with South Africa, that's progress. But I met the South Africans last year at Durban Film Festival. They all wanted to celebrate us, but we realized that the South Africans have funds, but the Nigerians have signed, but there's no fund. So we haven't moved further, right? And so it's important that has to be a policy that can allow for us to collaborate with as many countries as possible to open up space for the creative economy. Bilateral trade agreement is not just unique to film. It is something that drives development pretty much in every creative domain. Also, the second thing that we don't have that I think we must advocate for, and I'm doing it at the best of my ability, is tax incentives. Now, if you come to Nigeria, we'll give you a cost. And then you go all the way to France, and then the French, they're billing you maybe 40% more than what we're billing you. And then you realize that when you're done producing in the French government will give you maybe a 45% tax rebate. So I've lost my advantage. So though I'm cheaper, I don't have any tax incentives for the producers to come. But though the Europeans will be more expensive, they have tax incentives, right? So what does it take to have tax incentives? At the end of the day, you're going to attract more foreign direct investment. You're going to empower your creators. So we are still pretty much behind and in the way of policy. And the third thing that I would say, so long as we don't recognize IP as something we can collateralize, a lot of things will remain an idea. So these three things, tax incentive, co-production treaties, and recognizing IP as an essential part of something that can be funded will drive the growth of the creative economy, not just us filmmakers, but pretty much every aspect of the creative ecosystem.
Thanks. So now I'm going to go back to Isaac. One of the maxims of storytelling, most of us here are writers, is show, don't tell. Yeah. You didn't show us much. Yeah. So maybe you should tell us more about the story, and because it's not going to be like a 100% faithful adaptation, what was your favorite part of the story to adapt, and why?
Yeah, okay, so the Zara character, who is the reason why we have the entire story, was wasn't given so much space in the book. Those of you who read the book, do you remember anything Zara said in the book? She said only two lines at the point of her death. But she's a human being who had a life, who had a story. So we did a lot of backstory telling for some of the major characters. Zara plays the Woje. She's a wonderful singer. She has a sense of humor. She was a rebel in that sense of. So if you know the story very well, she was given away in marriage by her father in a very cruel manner, right? She never liked it. Even in the book, it was established like that. But then we gave her a presence in the film where you come to understand why she was against certain things, why she was probably the first feminist from northern Nigeria. It- I'm just saying, I'm just an example. But she was a human being who we needed to understand because from the way she was presented in the book, she was like every other person, but she was one of the most important pieces in the book. So that's just on Zara's part. So we did a lot of backstory telling so we could understand the motivations behind certain characters and why they did what they did, and then expanded on some of the themes, like some of the political elements in the book, like the coming of the British, how they were able to deceitfully get into our systems, get our lives, and eventually eroded our systems and corrupted our political setups and everything. We did a lot of in-depth interpretation, which is why I said it's an interpretation. So we interpreted the story, expanded it in such a way. It's about 2 hours long, the main film. So I mean, a book that you read in an hour, about 90 pages, is now 2 hours film. There's a lot of backstory telling. There's a lot of explanation to certain things that you probably did
Because
not
we
know.
can say it was a novella, really.
Yeah, go. You were saying something. Yeah, it's a novel about we we expanded. We basically expanded, interpreted some things, um, retold certain things. For instance, when we went to Kano to talk to the historians there, they gave us an explanation of how Sanchi, the blood spot, was done, which was slightly different from how it was presented in the book. So we fixed that in the visuals. So it's a lot of staying true to the real cultural thing and then also doing something that is visually appealing. So basically, it's interpretation.
Speaking about the source material, how did you get the rights for the book? How was it? Couldn't have been easy.
Nah, it was not. You want to talk about that first?
Well, I think we looked for the family for quite some time because the man had quite many children, right? And there was just too many parts, right? And we wanted to be sure which of the children had the rights. We found her; she had moved to Atlanta, and she was the one that the father willed it to. So we got the publishing company, and we had to also get the family. So when you're getting like a licensed IP, we're able to do that. And when we found her and we told her she saw what we wanted to do, she was very much excited and she became an essential part of everything we're doing. She's even one of the biggest proponents of our race, right? So at first, I mean, going back and forth took us about a year, right, to even get them to align. But eventually, looking at the terms, and we had lawyers doing lawyer work, and we had creators waiting for them to align so we can move on. And we eventually did. So yeah, it was a good one.
So I'm going to ask one final question before we throw the floor open, to the public. Okay. Are we back? Okay. Let the timer. Okay, so one last question for you, and you can make it as the answer as extensive as you like. I would just like you to basically shamelessly self-promote the project. Tell everyone here how they can maybe hop onto it to help, basically, because you're crowdfunding, you're going to need everybody's help. So tell us how.
Okay, so I'll tell you that animated movies are one of the most lucrative anywhere in the world. And the reasons are very easy. In 1,000 movies, you might find just 5 animated films. So in the ratio, because animation is grossly underrepresented, it has its own margin of profit that is always for animation. Now, globally, we have about 12 million people working in the industry. And if you are an animator or you also work in animation, you have a moral responsibility to watch a movie because it's not just an entertainment for you, it's also a case study for your projects, right? And on average, animation tickets, you have 5.5 million tickets sold globally. Now, once you multiply that by $9, which is the average cost of tickets in Europe and America on average, you probably will see what the numbers will look like. We were working with a $3 ticket size, and on that discounting on that because we are coming from Africa. But in all, you probably have close to $50 million in terms of global release, right? Now, only 2 movies from Africa have come out, and they both did about $76 million cumulatively. So this is very possible because we want to do both cinema and then after a while go to the streaming platform. So it's a combo of both. So if you invest in Passport and Ilia, there is a high possibility that you'll be making up to 5x of your return within the first 2 years of distribution, right? Apart from the beauty of the art and everything, it's a highly lucrative product, right? So we are refunded now, what means that we started with $100 for a minimum ticket size. We've increased that to $500 for a minimum ticket size. That means as many people as possible who can have $500 can join the campaign. You can also work with us as a champion. This is what we call champions. Champions tell their uncles who have money but don't watch films. There is something beautiful for you to invest in, right? And then they get a percentage of whatever they raise for us, right? But we have that design already. So if you can do $500, you're an advocate. If you can connect us, you're a champion. But it's really, we have different packages for at different levels of support, right? We're also talking to agencies, to banks to come on board because it's huge. It's a $2 million project. So when we can do what we can with our skill time, there are parts of the project that must be paid for, that we need the resources to do that. So this is a shameless invitation, like you said, shamelessly. I'm more a creative, so I don't do a lot of sell like I do, but this is one of the longest I've done, and I'm already exhausted. So help me here. I think it's something that if you're interested, you can meet us after now. We take the conversation. If you have rich uncles who are in politics, they need to diverse their investments as much as possible, and we are here to help them diversify.
Rich aunties.
Artists, but a lot of our artists are our fans. It just so happened that
Aunties.
Just go with the flow.
I go with the flow, right? But guys, so I really think that for every one of us, we have to be our own supporters. Just the way I'm making up my mind that I want to buy as many novels as I can living here, right? That's my own commitment because I love to read, right? I think that we all have to be our own first capital before the money can come. When we come together and back an idea we believe in, capital you just realize is collaboration. So, at the end of the day, if you can collaborate, that's capital. So we invite you to post for us. We share, shout it out, Thank you.
I'm going to close with a little something, but before that, we're opening for questions. So please raise your hands if you have any questions. Okay. Yes, you, that one, the one behind. Yeah, beside, yeah, you, yes. The only one. It looks like. And okay, let's start with the more visible one. Please ask your question.
You. Do you want to come forward and use this? I think
No.
the lady should come forward as well, so you guys can use the mic.
Where's the mic guy? Mic guy. Okay, it's now mic.
Thank you.
I want to ask a question about the alternative scenario. You made a comparison to Afrobeat. And like Afrobeat, before, Afrobeat has been international before in time of King Sonny Ade and other parts, but it didn't really last. But in this time of like Whiskey and Davido, I think one of the reasons it lasted so much is that they collaborated with the international artists there. And then it could somehow merge the culture and stay for a bit. And even now, most of the international artists, most of the Nigerian or African artists there are being managed by international labels, which, and I believe that in the near future, African labels will manage African artists that are doing well in Europe. But it's a collaborative effort to start. Now, you said something that if you had taken Netflix offer or other international studios, you will have started, you will have finished these products 3, 4 years ago. And that's a very long time. And I'm thinking that why did you not take that offer, build a reputation, get some finances, build a foundation, and then even do more? And then down the line, have enough clout to be able to put out your own stories and put out your own. And again, with the new era of social media, I don't think you can sell them a story and they change something and you can't make noise. With social media, you can make noise that, oh, that's not our story. You changed it, you gentrified it, and everything. And people will listen to you. So why I'm curious why you didn't take that route of building a foundation and building a base with the international guys first that had the clout, that had the resources, that had the engineers, that had the network, and then instead of what you're doing now.
Okay, so if we are a one project studio, this would have been helpful, but we are not. So Passport of Madam Ilia is not the only project we have worked on. We've done like two major films. We've collaborated with Cartoon Network, but that is not necessarily our IP. So like I said, there are many other successes and wins. But for this particular project, the terms of reference through part of collaboration has not always favored our retaining the IP, right? But for our short films, we have other IPs that we are potentially going to sell. But this is a licensed IP, we can't sell them. So that is one factor that we cannot just knock off the table. Like I said, we have about two completed short, we have about 10 different films. We've done a lot of work, lots of festivals, lots of awards. We've collaborated with Cartoon Network. We're collaborating with Sesame Street. So that side is sorted, but then invest. Because this, like I said, is a licensed IP and we have to find a way to get it out. So I think that suffices. I think the other lady.
The lady on the yellow seat.
No, you can come forward.
Oh, Aisha.
Hi. So my question is more about like the technical aspects of the work. How was it working with Nigerian animators? Would you say like there's a sufficient capacity of animators working in Nigeria? Because you mentioned the thing about software and how most of the necessary software, the licenses are not Nigerian owned as well. So do you think there's a way around that? Like if Nigerians can ever build similar software, is this something that would eternally
All right, thank you very much. That's a very good question. So the thing again is that when we started, we didn't have a lot of talent, but it was an opportunity. It became an opportunity for us because we launched our training school. So for us, everyone working on this project was actually trained by the studio to work on the project. So it was almost a 3 year. That's part of why you say we've been on it. Almost like a whole year or two was spent training people to get them on the project. And the good part is that that training school, we've launched an edtech platform now. So you can actually learn from Kaduna, right? It's running independent of the production studio, but we didn't think of it at the time until we thought of it to solve our problem. So that training school and a few other training schools that are springing up are now supplying talent for projects like this. But we couldn't have said that 3 years ago. Now the talent is growing because there are schools that is doing that. And we are one of the people also training people to put on projects. So yeah, I'm saying that the talent is emerging and it's a good thing to see.
Okay. Vito, my big sister wants to ask a question.
Hi, guys. Um, Congratulations on the progress you've made so far. I am excited about watching the full project. And who knows, maybe I have a rich uncle somewhere. I don't know. But I have two questions, really. The first is around the genre itself. Why did you decide it is animation you want to use to tell this particular story? What is it about the story that you feel lends itself to this particular genre as opposed to, say, a big budget Nollywood movie like we've seen in the past? And then the second thing, you spent a bit of time with Cyprian Quincy's daughter. I'm fascinated by him. And I know that in my early days, my mom is a writer, and I grew up reading him. I honestly did not know he was from the East. And I think had Nigeria moved slightly differently, we would now be talking about him as a northern writer because he was born here, he grew up here, and he clearly loved the place based on the way he wrote about it. So my question is, did you get any insights at all from talking to his family about the man himself and what sort of drove his storytelling? Thank you.
Well, all right. The first question as to why did we settle for the genre? Um, One, it was because we had become a studio doing animation, and we also felt we needed the world to see what we're capable of. And the economics in terms of the cost of production was higher, but the potential upside was even better. So that was what led us into animation. And then we had good directors and people that were who had animation understanding. But the book was also very cinematic. And it had that very old Hollywood, you call it, Western feel, like the good, the bad, the ugly, the fighting, the horse racing. So everything there was something that we felt animation would even bring to life in a more compelling way, right? And we have the license, so we can always explore possible option of a live action even after we've done animation because we still have it running. That's something that we might think about. We also think there's possibility for Broadway in future to do it in the UK and the rest, but what we are doing one step at a time. Meeting his family, he met his daughter and his son. He was a highly detribalized man, right? And you're very right. He was more northern than eastern because this was literally all his books were literally very much set around just African entertainment, Jaguar Nana. They were all. He didn't write from his native culture. He wrote from his experiential culture, and I think that's something we don't see a lot in the modern day Nigeria. And one of the reasons why we think going back to people like them is because literature has become so politicized that it become a tool for people to push an agenda that is not about unification or even bringing the people into a greater understanding of our common humanity. And when the collective suffers, we all suffer. So I think we found him as an individual very inspiring. Interestingly, we also met Bruce Onokabaya, professor. He also met him and worked with him to do a cover of another book. So Bruce worked with us on some of our concept art for this project. And he spent an entire evening telling us their life in Jaws, how they were part of a rebel group that just wanted to do something significant. And I found like there's so much wealth in those people that we are losing when we lose them, right? So I found his life very inspiring. And somehow we could see why he wrote the way he did. And that was something that we really treasure.
Okay, so a quick addition. They've asked us this question in multiple places, and I always tell them that it's a lot easier, not exactly easier, but it's a lot easier to recreate 19th century Kano sitting in front of your computer than the technical requirement of setting up a set, costume, props to do that. That's a $200 million thing.
Thank you. So one last question. Wow, hands are popping up. But the gentleman at the back there in white has been putting his hand up forever. So.
My name is Yusuf Idris Amoke, and I'm the Special Assistant to the Governor of Kaduna State on Climate Change. So interesting, I met Ferdinand in Senegal some 3 years ago, and I'm so happy seeing him again here in Kaduna because I met him while he was representing Nigeria, amongst 12 other countries, and he did his pitching, and he won. And we're so proud of him. He won 20,000 US dollars. The only problem is that I've not collected my share up to this day. So,
the pipeline.
so that's really interesting. Okay, we've had a lot of side talks with you, then. And I don't know, what do we need to do from this part of the country, northern Nigeria, and specifically Kaduna State, that we can house your kind of studio here, that we can actually tell the story from this perspective, because I felt it's going to add a lot of value. Even the brother talked about the northern culture is a cinematographic culture, which would actually tell a story that I think the world would appreciate and want to relate with. Thank you so much.
Wow. Yusuf, thank you so much. Do you know, coming, I think one of my colleagues is here. I think it was Ike that told me he loves northern architecture. I can't remember if it was you, but somebody was telling me that they love northern architecture. I started to fall in love with northern architecture when we started the movie. So I think really the North has something unique. Now, we've been in talks with the Kaduna state government to set up a hub here because for us, animation is something that is very remote. We can actually easily have 200 animators in Kaduna and they will earn in dollars and they will change this space and they will live a very good life because Kaduna is affordable. You're not in traffic, right? So I really think that that conversation is still something in the works, but I personally would think it's a win for us if we come out of Kabafest knowing that 6 months or 3 months down the line, that hub launches, right? I think Joseph is here. Joseph K is very involved. I mean, he's been advocating for us to come to and set up that hub. I really think one is good job creation. Animation is one of the areas where we have like a global demand for talent. Now, if you go to India, in India, you'll find like animation studios with like 3,000 people working. They work like factory guys, right? They just keep cutting out. So a production like Sesame, Simpson, is actually being done over in India, right? You just find one studio just cutting it and doing and it's good money, maybe $5 million per episode, and they'll give them 12 episodes and $60 million. That is just as big as a state can own. But the reality of it is that we have to see the possibility and then birth it. So I'm committed to see that in Kaduna, we can have set up a hub here and plug them into the global pipeline. Interestingly, we are launching a platform that will train and place people on jobs globally. So we have a solution already in the works. And I think with this kind of partnership, we're halfway there. Thank you, Yusuf.
So if anyone really in the audience is interested, or you know anyone who's interested in being an animator, just push them, encourage them. It's actually a very viable sector right now. Ife Sinachi, Adrian. So he started humbly doing small animations and doing storyboards. You know his story. Now he works for all the big studios. He has moved to California. I'm not saying that's a measure of the success, but to show you how much he has moved and grown. He's one of the main animators for the Fast and Furious animated show. See, almost every major animated show from Disney, everywhere. Yeah, I know he started with you guys. And look at where he is today. It's really viable. And I know personally that a lot of people are fascinated by telling stories via animation, but it's not so encouraging here. But to be honest, it is now. And I would like to personally encourage everyone in Kaduna State and beyond to jump in, especially if you have the prerequisite talent. We have time for one last question and we're closing. So, yes, that guy, your hand, sorry, you can ask your question.
Thank you very much. My name is Josiah Jaffet, and I'm a film journalist, and I'm very, very passionate when it comes to northern films. And I always have this issue where the representation of the North, when it's done by people who are not from northern Nigeria. And honestly, I'm really glad that this is coming because it's difficult to have films that are northern stories that are kind of mainstream. This is probably the biggest when it comes to budget now. This is probably the biggest we've heard that's coming from a northern story. So my question here is, I'm sure you might have had this nudging feeling about, because we're in sensitive times, and then we have people who, when after the film is out, they'll tell you, no, this is not how we do it in the North. This is not how we do this. So did you guys have that in mind, that you have people react? I know it's animation, and there's no much, pedestal to it like the real life films, but even though I know there are people who will, like myself, who want to see things being northern as much as possible. So did you guys have that in mind? And then how did you try to manage it to make sure that at the end of the day, it is as northern as possible? Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll do the best that we can. But at the end of the day, regardless of what we do or we don't do, people have different opinions. So we'll let everyone be the judge of their own perception. That's all.
So Isaac has answered that question. When Isaac was the head of the story team, and one of the reasons why we went ahead hunted him was because we wanted to see that we come close to accurate, close to as accurate as possible. But it's not like you can tick all the political correct boxes, but we've done our best, and we leave the rest to Allah.
So thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience. I mean, they're wonderful young men here, even though Fred is not so young. It's an incredible project, and we should please all support how we can and when we can. And we all look forward to seeing the film someday soon, or maybe even a trailer online later. Thank you very much. I'm Abdulkareem Baba Aminu. I'm with Ferdinand Adimefe and
Let's give them
Issac
a
Matui.
Kabafest